Elias Gray had never imagined that silence could feel so heavy. When the transport ship left him on the landing platform of planet Leora, the quiet wrapped around him like a long, forgotten memory. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of sweet metal and flowers that glowed faintly under the sun. Everything looked different from Earth, brighter, softer, almost alive in a way he could not describe. He stood there, gripping the handle of his single travel case. He had left behind an entire world, and all he owned now rattled inside that small box. Leora was supposed to be a fresh start, a place far from the mistakes he could no longer bear. The travel brochures had promised calm landscapes, peaceful settlements, and open jobs for off-world technicians. But none of them mentioned how lonely the first step would feel. Still, Elias breathed in deeply. The air was warm, as if the planet itself welcomed him. He looked at the sky, an unusual gradient of silver and pale blue, and felt something shift inside his chest. Maybe here, far away from the noise of Earth and the weight of his old life, he could learn how to breathe again. A soft hum rose beneath his feet. The ground gently vibrated, not violently, but like a living creature stretching beneath sunlight. Leora was rumored to be semi-sentient, reacting to strong emotions and movement. He had never believed such things before, but now he wondered. Maybe the planet sensed his fear, his hope, his uncertainty. His new home was a cluster of small houses near the edge of a glowing forest. They were built from pale stone and lined with long, curved windows. A walkway lit up as soon as he stepped onto it, guiding him forward. It felt almost magical, and for a moment his heartbeat slowed with a strange peace. But it wasn't until he spotted the figures waiting near the homes that he felt truly surprised. For tall silhouettes stood in a quiet group, their forms elegant and lightly shimmering. They were not human, not even close. Their skin had soft, natural colors like lavender, ocean green, or soft gold. Their eyes held gentle light, as if small stars rested behind them. All four were alien women. Elias blinked, unsure what to say or do. The interplanetary travel agent had mentioned that Leora had a low male population, but he had never imagined he would be the only human man in the entire settlement. The woman in front stepped forward. Her hair, long and silver like flowing water, shifted with the breeze. She wore a smooth, dark blue garment that wrapped around her in graceful layers. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind inside, crystal soft but clear. "Welcome to Leora Settlement 3, she said. "My name is Siren. We are your neighbors." Elias opened his mouth to answer, but only managed a small nod. Siren smiled gently, as if understanding every emotion written across his face. Behind her, the other women watched with curiosity, not fear. On Earth, people stared at him because of his failures. Here, they looked at him because he was new, different, but not unwelcome. Siren gestured toward the path. "Your home is ready. You traveled far. Come, we will show you." As Elias followed them, he noticed how calmly they moved, how their steps made no sound. They carried an air of peace that felt almost unreal. The walkway glowed brighter, responding to their presence. When they reached the small house assigned to him, Siren touched the door panel. It opened with a soft sigh, releasing warm air scented with unfamiliar herbs. "This place is safe," she said softly. "Leora is kind to newcomers, and we hope you will find comfort among us." Elias swallowed past the tightness in his throat. He had left Earth searching for a beginning. Standing at the threshold of his new home, surrounded by gentle strangers on a glowing world, he felt something he had not felt in years, a quiet, fragile hope that life might finally change. Elias woke on his first morning to a soft glow filtering through the wide windows of his new home. The walls pulsed faintly with warm light, changing as if breathing with the planet itself. He sat on the edge of the bed, his thoughts swirling. He was far from Earth, far from the cities, the noise, the mistakes he had carried like a weight on his shoulders. For a moment, he felt completely alone. Then there was a soft knock on the door. "Good morning," said a voice, clear and melodic. Elias froze. The accent was strange, almost musical, and it made his chest tighten with nervous excitement. The door opened slowly, and there stood Siren, the silver-haired woman he had met yesterday. She smiled, gentle and patient. "I thought you might need breakfast," she said. In her hands was a tray with warm, glowing food. The smell was unfamiliar, sweet and earthy, but it made his stomach rumble. Elias hesitated, unsure what to do, but she gestured kindly. "Please," she said. "Eat." He sat, and she set the tray in front of him. For a few minutes, they ate in silence. Elias watched her hands move gracefully, noticing the small ridges on her skin and the way her eyes reflected the morning light. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. After breakfast, she spoke again. "You have a lot to learn about Leora. It is different, but you will not be alone. I will help you." Before he could respond, another woman appeared at the doorway. Versatile, with green-tinted skin and eyes like liquid amber, smiled warmly. She carried a basket of small, glowing fruits. "Good morning, human," she said. "I hope your first night was comfortable. Today, we work together. There is much to do." Elias nodded. He had not expected this. On Earth, neighbors barely spoke to each other. Here, everyone was curious, attentive, kind. Over the next hour, the two women guided him outside. He followed them through the small settlement, observing the alien homes, the glowing pathways, and the floating gardens. Each movement felt alive, purposeful, as if the entire community had a rhythm he could not yet understand. "Your neighbors are curious about you," Veshra said softly, not in a dangerous way. "They want to understand you." As they spoke, a third woman appeared, Dryalta, whose skin shimmered pale gold. She carried a bundle of instruments and diagrams, showing him how the settlement managed energy from the planet itself. Elias listened intently, trying to absorb everything. On Earth, he had been a technician, but here, the technology was entirely different. Yet somehow he understood the logic. By the afternoon, a fourth neighbor joined them, Ithara, smaller than the others, with deep violet skin and bright eyes. She had a playful energy, moving between tasks with a curious smile. She handed Elias a small tool he had never used before. "Try this," she said. "Do not worry if you make mistakes. We learn together." Elias took a deep breath. The nervousness that had gnawed at him for years softened. These women did not judge him. They did not compare him to anyone else. They simply welcomed him. When the sun began to dip behind the crystalline mountains, Elias stood alone for a moment, watching the glowing forest sway in the evening light. He realized he had not felt this safe, this alive in a long time. His past failures, regrets, loneliness felt distant, softened by the strange warmth of Leora and the kindness of these alien women later. As the group gathered near a soft pool of glowing water, they shared stories. They asked about Earth, about storms, cities, and oceans. Elias spoke carefully, trying to find the right words. They listened, eyes wide, smiles gentle, fascinated by his memories. For the first time in years, he felt heard. When the day ended, Elias returned to his home, exhausted but strangely light-hearted. He looked out at the settlement, glowing softly under the twin moons. In the quiet night, he whispered to himself, Maybe this is where I belong." And for the first time since leaving Earth, he believed it could be true. Elias woke on his first morning to a soft glow, filtering through the wide windows of his new home. The walls pulsed faintly with warm light, changing as if breathing with the planet itself. He sat on the edge of the bed, his thoughts swirling. He was far from Earth, far from the cities, the noise, the mistakes he had carried like a weight on his shoulders. For a moment, he felt completely alone. Then there was a soft knock on the door. "Good morning," said a voice, clear and melodic. Elias froze. The accent was strange, almost musical, and it made his chest tighten with nervous excitement. The door opened slowly, and there stood Siren, the silver-haired woman he had met yesterday. She smiled, gentle and patient. "I thought you might need breakfast," she said. In her hands was a tray with warm, glowing food. The smell was unfamiliar, sweet and earthy, but it made his stomach rumble. Elias hesitated, unsure what to do, but she gestured kindly. "Please," she said. "Eat." He sat, and she set the tray in front of him. For a few minutes, they ate in silence. Elias watched her hands move gracefully, noticing the small ridges on her skin and the way her eyes reflected the morning light. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. After breakfast, she spoke again. "You have a lot to learn about Leora. It is different, but you will not be alone. I will help you." Before he could respond, another woman appeared at the doorway. Versatile, with green-tinted skin and eyes like liquid amber, smiled warmly. She carried a basket of small, glowing fruits. "Good morning, human," she said. "I hope your first night was comfortable. Today, we work together. There is much to do." Elias nodded. He had not expected this. On Earth, neighbors barely spoke to each other. Here, everyone was curious, attentive, kind. Over the next hour, the two women guided him outside. He followed them through the small settlement, observing the alien homes, the glowing pathways, and the floating gardens. Each movement felt alive, purposeful, as if the entire community had a rhythm he could not yet understand. "Your neighbors are curious about you," Veshra said softly, not in a dangerous way. "They want to understand you." As they spoke, a third woman appeared, Dryalta, whose skin shimmered pale gold. She carried a bundle of instruments and diagrams, showing him how the settlement managed energy from the planet itself. Elias listened intently, trying to absorb everything. On Earth, he had been a technician, but here, The technology was entirely different. Yet somehow he understood the logic. By the afternoon, a fourth neighbor joined them, Ithara. Smaller than the others, with deep violet skin and bright eyes, she had a playful energy. Moving between tasks with a curious smile, she handed Elias a small tool he had never used before. "Try this," she said. "Do not worry if you make mistakes. We learn together." Elias took a deep breath. The nervousness that had gnawed at him for years softened. These women did not judge him. They did not compare him to anyone else. They simply welcomed him. When the sun began to dip behind the crystalline mountains, Elias stood alone for a moment, watching the glowing forest sway in the evening light. He realized he had not felt this safe, this alive in a long time. His past failures, regrets, loneliness felt distant, softened by the strange warmth of Leora and the kindness of these alien women. Later, as the group gathered near a soft pool of glowing water, they shared stories. They asked about Earth, about storms, cities, and oceans. Elias spoke carefully, trying to find the right words. They listened, eyes wide, smiles gentle, fascinated by his memories. For the first time in years, he felt heard. When the day ended, Elias returned to his home. Exhausted but strangely light-hearted, he looked out at the settlement, glowing softly under the twin moons. In the quiet night, he whispered to himself, maybe this is where I belong." And for the first time since leaving Earth, he believed it could be true. That night, Elias could not sleep. The glow from the fissures in the hills reflected through his windows, painting his small home in soft orange and blue light. The hum beneath his feet was louder than usual, as if the planet itself was restless. He sat on the edge of his bed, his hands trembling slightly. Thinking of the Ember Vein and the danger it posed to the settlement, he remembered Earth, the accident that had haunted him for years. He had failed his team, failed to act in time, and had carried that guilt across the stars. For a long time, he had thought running to Leora would erase that shadow. But now he understood it could not. Not until he faced something real, something that mattered, and chose to act. A soft light appeared at his window. Siren stood there, silver hair catching the glow. She did not speak at first. She only looked at him, patient, steady. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle. "You are not alone, Elias. We do not expect perfection, only your willingness." Her words sank deep. For the first time in years, he felt a seed of confidence grow. Maybe he could try. Maybe he could help. He spread out the diagrams Rylda had given him, combining them with his own knowledge of energy flow, stabilizers, and material conductivity. The Ember Vein's fissures pulsed unpredictably. If left unchecked, it could tear the hills apart. But with the right alignment of stabilizing rods, placed precisely at energy nodes, the flow could be balanced. Elias's mind raced. The rods need to absorb and redirect the energy, not just block it, he murmured. If I miscalculate, it could be worse. Siren stepped closer, her presence calm. "We will support you. I and the others. You will not act alone." He took a deep breath. That was what mattered, the support, the trust. On Earth, he had felt isolated, judged, and unworthy. Here, they trusted him. Not blindly, but because they believed in his knowledge, his mind, his choices. That trust gave him strength. By morning, Elias had a plan. They would use the settlement's old stock of metallic rods, enhanced with reflective energy coatings from Leoran technology. He drew precise placements along the Ember Vein, marking nodes that pulsed strongest. Each rod had to be positioned at a calculated distance, angled perfectly to absorb the energy and prevent overflow. He called the neighbors together. Siren, Veshra, Rylda, and Ithara listened intently as he explained the plan. Their eyes glimmered with concern, but also with determination. "You understand?" Elias asked, his voice steady but tense. Siren nodded. "We follow your instructions exactly. Together, we will stabilize the vein." The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, yet it no longer paralyzed him. Fear was still there, sharp and real, but beneath it was courage, the kind born from necessity, from hope, and from being trusted. As the group prepared, Elias felt something shift inside him. He realized that this planet, these neighbors, were not just a new beginning. They were a mirror, reflecting what he had carried inside all along, the desire to be useful, to matter, to belong. For hours he checked and double-checked measurements, instructed the placement of rods, and guided the women through each step. Their cooperation, patience, and skill amazed him. Together, they were a team, flawed, human, yet stronger than the tremors beneath their feet. When the sun rose over the glowing hills the next day, Elias knew they would face the Ember Vein soon. The fear lingered, but so did hope, and for the first time in years he felt ready to meet danger. Not as a man running from his past, but as someone who could make a difference. The settlement watched, waiting for the first move, and Elias, heart pounding, hands steady, took that first step toward the trembling hills. He was no longer running. He was choosing to act. The sun had barely risen when Elias and the Leoran women stepped onto the hills. The ground beneath their boots trembled faintly, a warning and a reminder of the danger ahead. The ember vein had already begun to stir, tiny pulses of molten orange light rippling through cracks in the hills. Elias carried a pack of stabilizing rods, each carefully coated with the reflective material they had prepared overnight. The weight of it pressed on his shoulders, but more pressing was the responsibility he felt. If he failed, the settlement could be lost. If he succeeded, it would be the first time in years he had truly made a difference. Siren walked beside him, her calm presence steadying his nerves. "Remember, Elias," she said softly. "We move together. The planet is unpredictable. Trust yourself, and trust us." Veshra and Ithara flanked them, carrying tools to assist in positioning the rods, while Ryalta monitored energy pulses from a small floating device that hummed softly in her hands. The fissures stretched ahead like glowing veins, jagged and dangerous, as if the hills themselves were alive and breathing. Elias knelt at the first node. Sweat dripped down his forehead, but he forced himself to focus. He aligned the first rod, angling it exactly as he had planned. The molten energy pulsed, brightening with each careful adjustment. A wave of tension passed through him, but when the rod locked into place, the pulse softened slightly. "Good," Siren whispered, her hand briefly touching his arm, a reassuring weight. They moved along the fissure, node by node. Each placement required careful coordination. Elias instructed, and the women followed flawlessly, their movements fluid and precise. The rhythm of the work became almost meditative, even as the ground shivered beneath them. But the ember vein was far from dormant. A sudden tremor erupted beneath their feet, stronger than before, throwing Elias off balance. He stumbled, nearly falling into a glowing fissure. Veshra caught him just in time, her strength steadying him against the trembling earth. "It's alive," Elias muttered, breathing hard. "It reacts to our presence. It senses the energy," Ryalta said. "We must be careful. One wrong move." Her words trailed off, leaving the threat unspoken, but clear. Elias shook off fear and focused. Each step required precision, each breath measured. Ithara handed him another rod, and he angled it with care, feeling the heat from the fissure lick his gloves. The molten light reflected off the metal, a dangerous dance of energy that could turn catastrophic if misaligned. Hours passed. Their bodies ached. Their clothes smoldered faintly from the heat. But the fissures slowly began to calm under their efforts. Elias marveled at the teamwork, the silent understanding between the women and him, the trust they shared, and the way they moved as one unit. He realized then that this was not just about rods and energy, it was about connection, about belief in each other, and the courage to face something greater than oneself. Finally, they reached the last node. Elias positioned the final rod, his hands shaking from exhaustion. The ground pulsed violently one last time, then gradually settled, the orange light dimming into a soft, steady glow. The ember vein had stopped thrashing. The group stood in silence, the only sound their own heavy breathing. Elias felt a rush of relief, pride, and something he had not felt in years, hope that he truly belonged. Siren stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did it," she said quietly. "We did it together." Elias looked around at the Leoran women, their eyes shining, faces glowing with quiet triumph. For the first time, he realized that home was not a place, but a feeling of connection, a shared effort, a trust that gave life meaning. As the sun climbed higher, painting the hills in soft golden light, Elias allowed himself to finally breathe. The ember vein was calm, and the settlement below was safe. And for the first time since leaving Earth, he felt that he was not just surviving, he was living. The hills no longer seemed threatening. They were a testament, a proof of courage, trust, and the fragile but unstoppable strength of hope. Elias smiled for the first time in years. This was more than survival. This was belonging. The day after stabilizing the ember vein, Elias woke to a low, unsettling hum. He had hoped the worst was behind them, that their careful work had calmed the restless hills. But the energy readings Ryalta had recorded in the night told a different story. The fissures were not fully stable. He joined the Leoran women at the edge of the settlement. Their faces were serious but calm, each one focused on the task ahead. Siren's silver hair shone in the morning light, and her eyes met his with quiet reassurance. "The vein is shifting again," she said softly. "We must reinforce the stabilizers before the next tremor." Elias nodded. His stomach twisted, but he forced himself to breathe steadily. Fear was still there, sharp and insistent, but he had learned something in the last few days. Panic could not guide action. Only careful, focused effort could. They approached the fissure together, each step measured. The ground pulsed beneath them like a living heartbeat, stronger and more unpredictable than before. Tiny sparks of molten energy shot from the cracks, sizzling against the reflective rods they had installed. Keep calm, Vesher reminded him, her hands glowing faintly as she prepared new stabilizing devices. The planet responds to fear as much as to courage. Elias swallowed, gripping the first rod. A tremor surged suddenly beneath his feet, throwing him sideways. His glove slipped against the hot metal. For a terrifying moment, the rod wavered, and molten energy threatened to burst upward. Elias, Ithara shouted, leaping to steady him. Her violet eyes shone with determination. Together, they pushed the rod back into place. Elias felt the heat lick at his arms, sweat dripping down his face. But he could not let himself falter. The ember vein pulsed faster now, almost testing him, almost daring him to fail. Another tremor split the ground near Ryalta, sending a small spray of molten light into the air. She stepped back, but her eyes met his. You can do this. I believe in you. Elias took a deep breath. He remembered Earth, remembered the failure that had haunted him, and made a choice. He would not run this time. He would not let fear control him. With careful precision, he repositioned the last unstable rods, adjusting angles and distances exactly as he had calculated. The ground shook violently, more than it had before. Elias stumbled, nearly falling into the glowing fissure. Siren's hand shot out, catching him, her grip firm and steady. He looked into her calm eyes and drew strength. Together, she whispered, always together. With renewed focus, Elias and the Leoran women worked in unison, adjusting, reinforcing, and realigning. Each rod clicked into place, each pulse of energy dimming slightly. Sweat and soot covered them, but they moved as one, a single force against the restless power beneath their feet. Minutes stretched into hours. Finally, the ember vein pulsed once, long and slow, and then the ground settled. The molten light faded into a steady glow. Silence fell over the hills. The tremors ceased. Elias collapsed to his knees, chest heaving, heart pounding. He looked at the women around him, faces streaked with dust, eyes wide with relief, but shining with quiet triumph. Siren knelt beside him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. You did it, she said softly. We all did it, together. Elias allowed himself to smile, tears pricking his eyes. Relief, pride, and a fragile, overwhelming joy washed over him. For the first time since leaving Earth, he felt that he had truly made a difference. He had faced fear, embraced it, and acted. The Leoran women gathered around him, their presence warm and steady. In their trust, in their courage, Elias found something he had never expected, a sense of belonging, of being part of something greater than himself. The hills were calm, the ember veins silent, and in that quiet, Elias realized something profound. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to act. Even when fear was strongest, he had acted. And he was no longer running. For the first time in years, Elias felt the true meaning of home. The sun rose over Leora, painting the hills with gentle shades of gold and silver. The ember vein, once wild and unpredictable, now pulsed softly beneath the surface, steady and calm. Elias stood at the edge of the settlement, looking out over the valley, and felt something he had not felt in years: peace. The Leoran women gathered around him. Siren's silver hair shimmered in the morning light. Vesher's green-tinged skin glowed softly. Ryalta's pale gold eyes reflected the rising sun. And Ithara's violet energy threads danced gently in the air. They had survived the danger together. They had faced the planet's anger and tamed it. And now, the quiet that followed felt like victory, like a deep, shared breath after a storm. Elias looked at them and realized how much he had changed. When he had arrived, he had been afraid, lonely, unsure of himself. He had thought Leora was a chance to run from his past. But the planet, and the women who lived on it, had taught him something more important. Running never healed fear. Facing it, even when trembling inside, could build courage and trust and create connection. Siren stepped closer, her eyes calm and knowing. You have done more than we imagined, she said softly. You came from far away, carrying your fears, and yet you acted when it mattered most. You are one of us now. Elias swallowed. His throat felt tight. For a long time, he had doubted his worth, thinking his mistakes defined him. But looking into their eyes, seeing their trust and acceptance, he understood that courage was stronger than failure. That hope could grow even in someone who had been broken. I didn't do it alone, he said, voice thick. You all helped me, guided me, believed in me. Siren smiled. And we always will. That is what family does, no matter where it comes from. The other women stepped forward, linking hands around him in a quiet circle. Elias felt warmth flow through him, a gentle but unstoppable tide of belonging. For the first time, he understood what home really meant. It was not just walls and shelter, but trust, support, and shared purpose. He turned toward the valley. The settlement's homes glowed faintly under the rising sun. Paths lit with soft energy lines curved between gardens and trees. Birds or creatures like birds flitted across the sky, reflecting light in soft, glittering trails. Leora was alive, and it seemed to breathe with the hearts of those who lived there. Elias took a deep breath, feeling the wind brush his face. He remembered Earth, the loneliness, the regrets, the mistakes. But he no longer carried their weight in the same way. Here, on the strange and beautiful world, he had found something stronger: connection, courage, and a chance to grow. Veshra stepped beside him. "There will be other challenges," she said gently. "The vein may stir again, but you have learned something important. You are capable, and we are with you." Elias nodded. The knowledge filled him with quiet strength. Fear was still there, but it no longer ruled him. Courage, trust, and hope now lived alongside it, guiding each decision, each step. As the group walked back toward the settlement together, the glow of Leora's morning light stretched across their path. Elias felt a soft smile spread across his face. He had arrived on this planet as a stranger, a lonely human far from home. He would stay as something more, part of a community, a contributor, someone who mattered. He whispered softly to himself, letting the words carry on the wind. "I finally found home, and I will never run again." The women laughed softly, a sound like bells in the wind, and Elias felt the truth of it resonate in his chest. He was part of something larger than himself. He was no longer afraid. He was human, and he was strong, for the first time in his life. Elias Gray did not feel like an outsider. He was exactly where he belonged on Leora, among neighbors who had become family, in a world that had welcomed him fully, and in a life that he had the power to shape. The planet's light shimmered around them, soft and steady, as if acknowledging their courage. And Elias knew, without doubt, that he would never forget this day, this feeling, and the home he had finally earned.